We're in week 5 of the Elestrals Championship League, the final week of these regular matches versus everyone else, and my final opponent will be Red Baron piloting Mono Thunder. I think this will actually be my toughest matchup because Baron's just the whole Thunder package as a whole is just all about various types of control, and it does it very well, which kind of stinks for my deck since it does lean more towards control as well, but because Baron's deck is Baron control, in a control v control matchup, I would just get destroyed. So I had to get a bit creative this week, and part of that just involves using probably the most telegraphed card package that I have, that being Pantera. I think Baron will expect me to bring this one because it's definitely the most aggressive package I have, with also the highest attacker in the game right now by base stats with Pantera. So I fully expect Baron's deck to be tooled to out really the Twindra and Hydrake before I can get to Pantera, because I think once I get out Pantera, that's going to be the hardest for Baron to deal with. Not impossible, but definitely the most difficult. So I'm definitely expecting a Hydrake and Twindra to get Gorgon's Gazed, Poison Tipped Arrowed, if the scenario dictates it, and Resting on Your Laureled. And the biggest one is, I wouldn't be surprised if Baron runs Pandora's Box in his main deck, again, just to out the Hydrake and the Twindra. But since I know I cannot win in a control v control matchup, I knew I need to find a way to make my wind deck as aggressive as possible to kind of push through that control. But with no real game-ending combos existing yet that would be good against control, I'm kind of forced to just make this work. And I actually think I have a pretty good way of making Pantera work. Instead of trying to prevent Baron from answering these with stuff like Tornado to bounce back the back row, Helios' Chariot Ride to prevent Baron from using counter runes for a turn, or maybe his Invoke runes if it's his turn, I just decided that I am going to try to be as aggressive as possible and expect Baron to answer the Hydrakes and Twindras, try to make it as awkward as possible to deal with them, and then supplement with the other best aggressive package I have, an Exaltair, being able to burn Baron for 2 and accelerate up to 2 Wind Spirits on my board to be able to attack with. So I'm hoping that with the Baron hopefully mostly being worried about the Pantera line and trying to answer that, then I might be able to sneak an Exaltair and just really put on the pressure, and also utilize Sorlet as just a phenomenal, more offensive, it is still a control tool, but more offensively pressuring control tool as well. And again, just use these tools to get Baron to answer it, to get Baron to use those spirits, get Baron to use his cards, and just hope that I can try to overwhelm him that way. I've noticed Baron hasn't been running Nectar of the Gods in his deck for the deck profiles that I've seen, so I think that it's not preposterous that I'll be able to out-pressure him with these cards. So getting into the card by card, for the Pantera package, I went 3 Hydrake, 2 Twindra, 3 Pantera. 3 Hydrake because this is obviously our starter, so we want to max this out to make sure we see it. Only 2 Twindra because 1, I don't want to brick on it, and 2, I don't think I have enough spirits to, or the longevity with this deck, both spirit-wise and card advantage-wise, to really expect to be able to get out 3 Twindra in a game. I think 2 will be plenty, and if I get to the 2, I actually don't think, I think on average I'll probably get to 1 for sure, but I could also see Baron also answering, so I never get to it. So I think 2 is perfectly fine, and only 1 Pantera for the same reason. I expect to get at most 1 Pantera, but I feel like Baron's going to mostly try to keep me off of it and actually pretty effectively answer it. So I'm not expecting to go into Pantera. So, and if the only reason I can see to run more Pantera is if I expected to go into multiple, which I do not have the spirits for, or if I expect Baron to maybe be able to mill it since he's running Pandora's Box, or as a preventative if Baron tries to mill it with Pandora's Box, or discard it off a Spark if I unfortunately draw into it. But the counter to that I came with it, and the reason why I'm running this ratio, is that Baron doesn't know what ratios I'm actually running for these. So just the pressure of these alone, which is mainly what I'm trying to play into, I'm not, like if I get out Pantera, that's great, but I'm actually playing into expecting these to get answered. It doesn't matter how many I run, because Baron will probably treat it as if there is that Elestral in deck. So just kind of using that unknown knowledge to my advantage there. I also don't expect to even have enough spirits if I do get out Pantera and it dies, to be able to spawn out like Twindra to need 3 Twindra. I think, 1, if I get out Pantera, I'm either winning, or I could also see Baron having the answer, or honestly, whatever I've left will be enough to close out the game. But again, I fully expect Hydrake and Twindra to hold their most of the weight in this matchup. I could see Baron maybe being very cautious and maybe not answering one of these on a turn if he doesn't have a clean out to it, just to make sure I can't get into the next one or into the Pantera. And that's where I'm saying, like, I want to take advantage of those like awkward scenarios and just capitalize it to put on the most pressure possible to kind of force Baron to start responding. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that I don't need to go into Pantera in this deck for these cards to just demand a good spirit and card investment, which can put on a lot of friction. But of course, I can't solely rely on these for aggression, so I do run a couple other 1 spirits, actually quite a few. The most I've run out of any of these weeks: 3 Aramare, 1 Carrion, 3 Exaltair, 3 P-Gust, and 3 Sorlet. I've touched a bit on Sorlet. This card is just phenomenal for answering whatever Baron has. I could fully see him if he sees a Hydrake out and doesn't have the clean answer out, just going into Astrabbit or Rice Roast to slow things down, and Sorlet will help me kind of pick away at that and require Baron to actually answer some if he doesn't want that Elestral to be run over. And in general, Sorlet just outs anything I really expect Baron to use. I just kind of expect him to use a lot of his really good 1 spirits and maybe go into Galvanom. I don't see him running Sonic Core because that's just an easy way for me to crash up into Pantera. So, but again, Sorlet even outs Galvanom, he will need a back row to be able to defend against it. P-Gust is great here for some rune control. Again, I kind of want Baron to use the runes because it means that he's using spirits, but if I'm ahead and want to stay ahead, P-Gust is a great way to keep Baron off. Like maybe if he's top decking counter runes and instead of them, I can just kind of pop them with P-Gust. Just some extra utility there is great. And of course, since I do run 3 Exaltair, if for whatever reason I can ever get 2 of these to stick, that's amazing. I can just do what I did in Johnny's matchup, just pop a ton back row, burn Baron for some spirits. I don't think it's going to be as effective because of course these don't hit good numbers, and I kind of want to be attacking over Baron's Elestrals and keep him off of it as opposed to when I was faced against Johnny, but it's still a combo nonetheless, and I think P-Gust is worthy. And again, Thunder really doesn't have that many great Elestrals, so I think P-Gust earns its spot here. Exaltair of course was the other end of the aggressive package, so of course want to run this at 3. Aramare just has a good stat line. It's not amazing in this matchup. 5 defense is nice to be able to stall. The 4 attack isn't, it's going to be difficult because it crashes a lot, but we have some ways to actually help deal with it. And then the 1 Carrion, because when I was trying to round out this deck, I just wanted some more Elestrals because in testing, it would always get into like a top deck scenario. And I just wanted to make sure that, I guess when it came to the last slot in this deck, I was just saying to myself, what does my deck feel like it needs? Sometimes just drawing into an Elestral to play, and Carrion, I think, will serve that role very well. 3 attack means it plays around PTA, meaning it can still deal some damage, which is nice. And I can also see some scenarios where Carrion can also help me, like just whittle away at Baron's board, just crash it into something, and either take out another Elestral on Baron's board, or ideally, if he has 2 Elestrals with the same attack out, I can just crash them and just use it as a board wipe, just kind of a reset tool for 1 spirit. So I thought this was a good way to round out the deck here. Moving over to the wind-specific runes, I've run 2 Bag of Winds, 3 Aeolus, and 2 Island of Aeolia. Aeolus should be pretty self-explanatory here. Because this deck is kind of more piece-dependent, it can't just go in with whatever it has and make the best use of it. Different pieces address different scenarios. It's nice to have that search here in the deck, and also this doubles as a great Nexus target for Exaltair, but most of the time I kind of expect just throw 2 spirits on it and just throw it away, though just because the deck's so expensive. But I'm going to pay attention to the board state because I might be able to leverage 2 spirits on Aeolus to maybe bait out a Thunderstorm and keep it away from some other stuff, or maybe I might just be in a scenario where I know I need an Elestral, so I'm just have to bet on this Aeolus surviving. So that's a good note there. I fully expect Baron to run Thunderstorm, so can't just sit on the Aeolus as safely as it against Johnny. 2 Bag of Winds because it is a great Nexus bank for Exaltair, with some other fun implications. Bag of Winds on any of these things can help it survive better against Baron's control tools. It makes it so that it cannot be targeted by resting on your laurels. That can be very relevant for Twindra and Pantera if that ever comes up, more likely to Twindra. And it also protects it from notably Zeus, meaning I might be able to just throw out a Bag of Winds on one of my other Elestrals, like maybe an Aramare or P-Gust, and have it be like super sticky if it needs to. That one I think is more of a fringe scenario, but it's definitely worth noting there. So just kind of some double utility in this card, or really multi-utility in this card, that I think makes it worth running it at 2 copies. And of course the dream is Pantera with this out, because pretty much if I throw out Bag of Winds, the best way for Baron to answer the Elestral would be to just have Thunderstorm to pop it. He could also do Galvanom, but ideally I'm keeping off Elestrals. But just some like Thunderstorm or Galvanom to pop it to then be able to use other stuff will be the only way he can out. It's just an extra layer of protection if it comes up. And then 2, Island of Aeolia, because I fully expect Baron to run Jolton with Mount Olympus, and being able to pop his Mount Olympus with an Island of Aeolia means it's harder for him to hit over stuff like Sorlet and Arrowmare, while making Sorlet and Arrowmare more easily hit over his stuff. And Hydrake to an extent, I kind of expect to want to crash Hydrake more, but I guess the same logic also applies for Twindra as well. On top of that, it's just another Nexus Bank for Exalter, so overall I do think this card has a lot of utility in this deck as well, just kind of like Bag of Wind, so we're throwing it 2 copies. For the counter runes, this is where I make the most space in my deck because I don't think the counter runes are actually best here. Because I'm wanting to be as aggressive as possible, I don't really want to be using spirits to control Baron's board. If I'm just solely relying on these, then I'm just burning myself out without actually progressing my game state, and with how expensive my deck is, again, I'll just lose that control v control matchup. So I just want to run enough where I can cause some friction for Baron, help me keep Elestrals on board to keep up the offensive pressure, but also not brick on them as much. Maybe like I was noticing when I was testing with 3 of each that I was just drawing into counter after counter when I really just needed an Elestral. So I decided to cut this back and opt more into Elestrals. But I think the best 2 are Gorgon's Gaze and Poison Tip Arrow. Gorgon's Gaze can stop a lot of the search effects or other utility effects. Baron's Elestrals have some probably the best effects in the game, outside of a few outliers, but like collectively they have the best group of effects for the element, and Gorgon's Gaze is going to be crucial for stopping Baron from getting that value. And Poison Tip Arrow is here. I think Poison Tip Arrow is better than Shield. Sure, Poison Tip Arrow doesn't stop an attack, so sometimes I'll take more damage than if I just shielded it, but I kind of want to keep Baron off of cards because again, I haven't seen him running Nectar of the Gods, and if I can kind of limit him to just at one point just having to top deck, that's going to be the ideal scenario for me to just kind of run away with it aggressively, and Poison Tip Arrow plays more into that since I get to pop the Elestral. Also, with Shield of Achilles, it gives Baron access to a lot of his good utility effects because there's a lot of on-cast or like when received as spirit effects he can use, but I still want to keep the 1 shield because in testing, I felt like I just want to see that 1 extra counter rune just a bit more frequently. Obviously, I'd rather it be a 4th Gorgon's Gaze or a 4th Poison Tip Arrow, but I think that the downsides of Shield being able to bounce back stuff and get Baron to reuse effects is not as important as just having that extra counter rune to be able to maybe keep up on board a bit more. And this card's still like good against Spark Hit at least, but overall, if I can, I'd rather just get rid of the card so Baron doesn't have something to reuse the following turn. Rounding off the deck with the general Invoke runes, I got 3 Ambrosia, 2 Drops of Leth, and 2 Resting on Your Laurels. 3 Ambrosia because my deck is expensive. Therefore, I want to be able to sustain as much as possible. This can be the difference between me being able to make a play that secures my game versus me just not having the spirits to be able to do so. 2 Drops of Leth. This is a big conversation that I've kind of had with myself about this deck, and just that's been relevant in general, especially since Baron released his video about Nectar of the Gods. Pretty much what it boils down to in this deck is it's expensive, and I found that using these Nectar of Gods just always resulted, I had the cards, but I didn't have the spirits to really do what I wanted. So I decided that I really only needed 2 cards, and I could really only afford 2 cards in the deck that involve like drawing and such. So then it came down to, do I run Drops of Lith, Nectar of the Gods, or a 1-1 split? But what determined it is that my deck is very much more situationally piece reliant, especially with pieces like Pantera and Twindra in the deck, that actually I should also mention Bag of Winds as well, that I feel like Drops of Leth is the better option here. I would rather shuffle multiple cards back in and see more cards than get 1 card up on Baron. I'd rather just find the pieces, make the most of it, and have a chance to find those exact pieces more so than just raw card advantage. And a lot of the times I can find those specific pieces with Aeolus, which again costs 2 spirits as well. So I just think the Drops of Lith with the Aeolus is just the better consistency engine. And then from there, since I'm trying to be so aggressive, that I kind of hope that I don't need the card advantage. I can just kind of out card advantage Baron overall. It's not going to be easy to do, but maybe if he's like bouncing stuff back with Shield of Achilles while I'm not running as much, that's a great way for me to keep card advantage. So I guess in summary of this ramble, I found that Drops of Leth to find more specific cards over just getting card advantage is more important. And finally, Resting on Your Laurels, because there will definitely be times where Baron's up Elestrals on board with 2 or more spirits, and Resting on Laurels is going to be a great way to equalize it to try to get ahead again, especially with Baron having access to Zeus and Mount Olympus pretty easily through Elechick and Jolton. I think the 2 of this makes a lot of sense. For the side deck, I'll be honest, I think the only relevant card here is the Resting on Your Laurels, the third copy. I might cut the Shield of Achilles if I really feel like this card is biting me in the butt, just for a more permanent form of removal. The only difference is Shield can help me protect my Elestrals from attacks, while Resting on Your Laurels does not. But it's just a balancing act between the utility these two cards provide, protecting Elestral versus just permanently getting rid of something. That's going to be the question here. And the rest of the deck, Carry On might come up if I feel like I might want another Elestral, so it's another option to switch out Shield with. But otherwise, I feel like my main deck is pretty good. Just decided to run a second Patera and a third Twindra if I really feel like it's necessary. And then from there, I run some other stuff that I could just side out and maybe and if it gets to like a game 3 scenario and I feel like I just need the element of surprise in my hand, I do run the stuff to kind of switch into that kind of cool Chrysor Exalter P-Gust strategy that I was running against Johnny, with 3 Chrysor, a 3rd Island of Aeolia, 2 Shield of Achilles, and the 2 Nectar of Gods. Just kind of switching more into that. I think more realistically, if I do want a surprise strategy, what I do is I cut out a Twindra and a Pantera and at least run 2 Chrysor. And that way, since Baron doesn't know that I actually sided it out, if I'm still running the Hydrakes, he may still try to respect it, still try to answer it, despite me not actually going into that, or maybe not having the card to go into. So maybe a fun way to get Baron to use extra spirits when he doesn't need to. And then of course Chrysor is actually pretty difficult to deal with at 8 attack. Baron's Elestrals usually cap out at 4 attack naturally, meaning that a Zeus plus Mount Olympus is necessary to even crash it, and I'm getting Spirit Recovery on there. So that's possible, but again, I don't really expect to really go into much of it for the reasons I outlined. Like the main deck cards seem really solid, and I do think that just this aggressive strategy is going to be the best way for me to win it. I'm honestly both excited and nervous for this match this week because I put in a lot of thought and effort because I really want to try my best to see if I can best a deck that seems very intimidating. So if I win, I'm going to be elated, but if I lose, I'm definitely going to be disappointed and frustrated because I'm really invested at this point. But I want to hear from you all. Is there anything that you would run differently in your deck? Maybe you would think of a completely different strategy against Mono Thunder. So I want to hear from you all. What are your opinions? Do you think I was on the nose, or do you think you got a better idea that I should have done instead? As has been the case for the past 3 weeks, as has been the case since the beginning of the ECL, the games will go up at 10 a.m. EST on Saturday, so the day after that this video is posted. So you can check that out on my channel. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you're notified when that's uploaded. I'll also have it linked down in the description once it is properly uploaded. And of course, you can check out my opponent Red Baron's preparations on his channel, as well as the gameplay going up at the same time, linked down in the description below, as well as the other ECL participants, Jade Johnny, who has the bye this week, LUCK, and Wirtz, who are both playing each other this week. Again, they'll also have their prep and gameplay up as well. So go check them out. Both that being said, look forward to more ECL content, as well as just content in general coming out real soon.